What up, though? Weapons and warfare. Dogs of the conquistadors. Who are the conquistadors? Some may call them Spanish invaders. Some may call them Spanish immigrants. By MSW. This is from 2024. These are the conquistadors and their dogs. The Spaniards began using dogs at least by the 1260s, as King James or Jaume the First of Aragon, Catalonia, supplied guard dogs to garrisons of regional castles. When Christopher Columbus returned to the New World in 1493, Don Juan Rodriguez de Fonseca, in charge of supplying the expedition, included 20 mastiffs, these would be Spanish mastiffs, and greyhounds as weapons. The mastiffs, which could weigh as much as 250 pounds and stand 3 feet high at the shoulder, were brute attackers, while the greyhounds were speedy and made lightning quick strikes, often trying to disembowel their opponent. In May 1494, the Jamaican natives, the indigenous Jamaicans, in 1494, the Jamaican natives did not look friendly, so Columbus ordered an attack. One war dog caused absolute terror. So Columbus in his journal wrote that one dog was worth 10 soldiers against Indians. The Jamaican natives, or the indigenous Jamaican people, are also referred here to as Indians. During the Haiti campaign, opposed by a huge native force, again, indigenous Haitians. All 20 dogs fought at the Battle of Vega Real in March 1495. Alonso de Ojeda, who had fought with them against the Moors, commanded the dogs. He released the dogs shouting, "Tomalos," basically, sick 'em. Sick 'em. An observer said that in 1 hour, each dog had torn apart at least 100 natives, 100 indigenous Haitians. The island was taken largely by terror of the dogs. Later conquistadors included Ponce de Leon, Balboa, Velasquez, Cortés, De Soto, Toledo, Coronado, and Pizarro all used war dogs. Some Spanish started a cruel practice called La Monteria Infernal, the hellish hunting or dogging, setting the dogs on the chiefs or other important people in the tribes. When their leaders were torn to shreds, the tribes often surrendered. The dog amigo helped in the conquest of Mexico. Bruto, belonging to Hernando de Soto, assisted in the conquest of Florida. When Bruto died, the Spaniards kept it secret because the natives feared him so much. They're speaking of the natives of Florida, the indigenous people of Florida. Perhaps recognizing the Spanish love for war dogs, in 1518, King Henry VIII of England sent 400 war mastiffs, garnished with good iron collars, spiked collars, to the Holy Roman Empire, Charles V of Spain. The Spanish sent war dogs to their New World campaigns to help conquer much of South and Central America. Just as the invaders' horses terrified the natives, so did the dogs, because the likes of these creatures had never been seen. The Aztec king Montezuma was told that the Spanish dogs were huge, spotted like ocelots, with ears doubled over, great hanging jowls, blazing yellow eyes, gaunt stomachs, and flanks with ribs showing. They went about panting, tongues hanging out. Their barks astounded the Mexicans. They were told that the dogs would kill anyone who annoyed the Spaniards. The dogs often preceded the horsemen in column, panting, with foam dripping from their mouths. A German explorer accompanied the Spaniards to Colombia and saw a brigade of mastiffs used to scout out ambushes by the Chibchas Indians. These animals wore quilted armor to protect them from arrows, and they learned to kill the natives by tearing out their throats. The Indians were terrified of these dogs. An account in 1553 says Pizarro's dogs were so fierce that in 2 bites with their cruel teeth, they laid open their victims to the entrails. The dogs the Spaniards brought were mostly war dogs. These dogs were strong and ferocious, accompanying their owners in battles. They were usually wearing armor to protect them from enemies and were incredibly valued. The Spaniards depended so much on their war dogs that they trained them to kill. They often had them fast days before a battle to make them more lethal against their enemies. They were also used as a method of torture against Americans. European dogs were large and aggressive. According when the Aztecs first met the Spanish war dogs, wolfhounds, greyhounds, lurchers, pit bulls, and gigantic mastiffs, similar to modern Rottweilers, they had absolutely no idea what they were dealing with. Indeed, they did not think these animals were dogs at all. They thought they might be some species of dragon, an impression compounded by the fact that the Spanish dogs were armored in chainmail and steel plate like their masters, and were thus almost invulnerable to stone weapons. Fasted before battle, so they were in a state of voracious, slavering hunger, trained to fight and kill with the utmost ferocity. These terrifying animals already relished human flesh, having been used repeatedly in acts of genocide against the Indians of Hispaniola and Cuba. Unleashed in snarling, baying packs, their tongues lolling, drool dripping from their fangs, and sparks of fire seeming, in the imagination of the victims, to flash from their eyes, they tore into the Aztec front lines with devastating effect, disemboweling men, ripping out their throats, feasting on their soft, unarmored bodies. They are tireless and very powerful. These attack dogs, often wearing their own armor, were the common European shock and awe tactic of the period. The first documented New World use of these canine SWAT teams occurred in 1495 when Bartholomew Columbus, Chris's brother, used 20 mastiffs in a battle waged at Santa Maria el Antigua. Darien, with his brother, employing the same approach a year later. The Spanish reveled in holding human hunts in holding human hunts called La Monteria Infernal, where much sport was made of chasing and killing local men, women, and children. The noted Spanish apologist Bartolomé de las Casas has left us numerous accounts of these exploits of the hounds from hell, and it is easy to understand why these horrific memes still prevail in the cultures of Latin America. The names of many of these dogs so esteemed by the Spaniards still live on, and here are but a few. Bersarulius, Bercerulio, the terror of Borinquen, or Puerto Rico, until he was fallen by 50 arrows, received a salary 1.5 times that of an archer from his owner, Ponce de Leon. Leoncillo, Little Lion, Bercerullo's son, was Balboa's warrior, earned over 500 gold pesos in booty during his many campaigns, and he was the first Western dog to see the Pacific. When ordered to catch a native, he would grab the man's arm in his mouth. If the man came along quietly, they walked slowly to Balboa. If there was any resistance, the dog ripped him apart. Bruto, De Soto's champion, received 20 slaves as spoils before his career ended. Breed standards for the Spanish Mastiff. General appearance, the breed is longer than it is high. Head. The big strong head is shaped like a truncated pyramid, broad at the base, and the medium-sized triangular ears hang close to the head when at rest, but are partially pricked at the top when attentive. The ears are not cropped. Coat, thick and dense. Size, height, male, 30.5 inches, female, 28.5 inches. Weight, 121 to 154 pounds. This is the breed standard. It doesn't mean that some dogs aren't larger, some aren't smaller. Depends on the breeder and things of that nature. Temperament, an obedient guard, sure of itself, aware of its own enormous power, and very determined when facing harmful animals or strangers. You've all seen mastiffs. The history of Hernando de Soto in Florida, or on record of the events of 56 years from 1512 to 1568 by Bernard Shipp. This is from 1881. Just a few notes here. Appears to have been some part of either Carolina or Florida. 20th of March, 1523, we perceived by the great fires near the coast that it was inhabited, wondering at our dress, countenance, and complexion. They go entirely naked, except that about the loins they wear skins of small animals like martens, fastened by a girdle of plaited grass, to which they tie all around the body the tails of other animals hanging down to the knees. All other parts of the body and head are naked. Some wear garments or garlands similar to birds' feathers. The complexion of these people is black, not much different from that of the Ethiopians. Their hair is black and thick and not very long. It is worn tied back upon the head in the form of a little tail. In person, they are of good proportions, of middle stature, a little above our own, broad across the breast, strong in the arms, and well formed in the legs and other parts of the body. The only exception to their good looks Let's move on. They are not very strong in body, but acute in mind, active and swift of foot, as far as we could judge by observation. Which means the people who they saw fit this particular description. As we saw before, they said the opposite about these people. Some of these people are possibly some of your ancestors. Remember, we are talking about, it said Carolina. One more time, it says, appears to have been some part of either Carolina or Florida. So, yeah. We could not learn a great many particulars of their usages on account the distance of our ship, on account of the distance of our ship from the shore. We found not far from these people another whose mode of life we judged to be similar. Covered with immense forests of trees, more or less dense, too various in colors, and too delightful and charming in appearance to be described, adorned with palms, laurel, cypress, and other varieties unknown in Europe, that send forth the sweetest fragrance to the greatest distance. I know we were speaking of the conquistadors' dogs, but I wanted to share with you some of what they saw in terms of whether it's the flora or the fauna. This is the first account of the Indians of this part of the Atlantic coast, and is much the same as that given by later voyagers. Continuing to coast along the shore, the inhabitants being numerous, we saw everywhere a multitude of fires. Many of the natives came to the beach indicating by various friendly signs that we might trust ourselves on shore, expressing the greatest astonishment at the whiteness of his skin. Now, this is no shot to the people who are termed Native Americans today. And when you see them, most of them are generally the same complexion as Anglos or Europeans, as we term, or white people, what we term as white people. Why would these people who resemble in complexion white people be astonished at the whiteness of these early explorers' complexions or skin? They wouldn't be. Expressing the greatest astonishment at the whiteness of his skin. Imagine that the natives were about to roast him for food. After a short stay with them, showing high signs that he wished to return aboard, they hugged him with great affection and accompanied him to the shore. Then, leaving him that he might feel more secure, they withdrew to a little hill front, which they watched him until he was safe in the boat, probably a mound. They watched him from a mound. This young man remarked that these people were black, like the others, that they had shining skins, middle stature, and sharper faces, and very delicate bodies and limbs, and that they were inferior in strength, but quick in their minds. And always following the shore, which stretched to the north, we came to the space of 50 leagues to another land, which appeared very beautiful and full of the largest forest. By searching around, we discovered in the grass a very old woman and a girl of almost 18 or 20 who had concealed themselves for the same reason. The old woman carried two infants on her shoulders and behind her neck a little boy 8 years of age. We gave them a part of our provisions, which they accepted with delight. But the girl would not touch any, everything we offered her being thrown down in great anger. We took the little boy from the old woman to carry with us to France. Or let me take the romance out of it. We kidnapped the little boy from the woman to carry with us to France, and would have taken the girl also, who was very beautiful and tall. But it was impossible because of the loud shrieks she uttered as we attempted to lead her away. Having to pass some woods and being far from the ship, we determined to leave her and take the boy only. So they kidnapped the boy. Now you see where this comes from. It's almost hard to call they aren't humans. So what are they? We found them fairer than the others, and wearing a covering made of certain plants, probably moss, which hung down from the branches of the trees, tying them together with threads of wild hemp. Their heads were without covering and of the same shape as the others. We saw many of their boats, 20 feet long and 4 feet broad, made out of one tree, without the aid of stone or iron or other kinds of metal. They're speaking of possibly your ancestors' boats made each out of one whole tree. The natives gave them turquoise stones, some emeralds, and pieces of coral, and told them that they had the emeralds in exchange for quills and parrots' feathers from a certain people that dwelt in very high mountains to the north. These Indians were polite people. They had houses more large and handsomely built than was common. Their women were used with great respect. They wore shifts of bombazine cotton, which reached below the knee, and a sort of sleeves made of deer skin, which touched the ground and were perfumed very sweet with certain roots. The cacique, or the chief, or the head of the family, irritated against the Spaniards because they had some time previous cut off his nose and caused the dogs to devour his mother. One of the most efficient warriors was a dog named Beracillo, renowned for courage, strength, and sagacity. It is said that he could distinguish those of the Indians who were allies from those who were enemies of the Spaniards. He was the terror of the natives. He was the terror of the Americans. He was the terror, possibly, of some of your people. And this is a Spanish Mastiff. Imagine with armor, spiked collar, and having fasted for 3 days. Some of you have a dog. I've had dogs in the past. And, fasting for 1 day, fasting for 12 hours is unheard of, but for 3 days, unimaginable torture. The Spanish low down dirty dogs. Do the right thing.